Hi, welcome to the 32 in 32 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire show for week 11. I'm Dave Cruz. Thanks for being here always. Let's recap some of the things that happened this past week. Kind of knew it was going to be a weird week when Miami beat the pants off Baltimore on Thursday night. The defense from Miami was flying around with more energy than I think I've seen them this year. And Baltimore looked a little bit flat, but they looked a lot confused in that game. Yesterday, there were so many blowouts. I thought I was watching college football on a Saturday. Cowboys, the Patriots, the Bills, the Panthers, the Eagles, the Packers, and the Chiefs all won by at least 17 points, and a lot of those games weren't even that close. I don't remember a doubleheader, both games being kicked to other games on the same day. We had the Cowboys playing the Falcons on Fox and the Browns playing the Patriots on CBS, and those games both got kicked in the third quarter. The Browns game moved to the New Orleans and Tennessee game, and the Cowboys game moved to Tampa Bay and Washington. And since the Raiders and the 49ers, who are in my area, were both playing night games, the Raiders Sunday night, the 49ers Monday night, I got to see as a bonus at the end of the Tampa Bay game, got to see the final overtime period between Detroit and Pittsburgh, which was just ugly. I guess that game deserved to be a tie. Both teams just had numerous chances in overtime. There were missed field goals, there were fumbles. It was just a brutal game. And COVID still seems to be in effect in the NFL. Denver and Minnesota were both hit pretty hard this week with absences. Minnesota survived theirs. They won against the Chargers in LA, but Denver didn't have it so good. Philly manhandled them on their home turf. Also, good news, Cam Newton is back in Carolina. I'm sure you all have heard that by now. But something to keep an eye on there. They definitely had a package ready for him to go after only 2 days practice, and it sounds like they're going to be getting him ramped up for a start in week 11. There's one more game this week. Tonight's game is the Rams at the 49ers. Kind of surprising that the Rams are only a 3.5 point favorite in this game. But the 49ers do have a 4 game winning streak against the Rams, and Vegas is usually pretty good at setting odds. So let's see if Kyle Shanahan can dial up a win and extend the 49ers winning streak against the Rams. For the 49ers, Jeff Wilson, this is his second week back. Didn't do much in week 9, but I am going to be keeping an eye on him for week 10. He will have a role most likely with JaMycal Hasty out. That's an eye to the future for Jeff Wilson. And also a new signing in Los Angeles. Odell Beckham Jr. wound up with the Rams, and he will have a role tonight because unfortunately, Robert Woods suffered a torn ACL in Friday's practice for the Rams, and he's done for the year. Woods is just a real nice fantasy player, and it's a tough injury for him. Prayers up to him. Let's look at some of the new injuries this week. I was a little bit surprised that Alvin Kamara's knee injury was bad enough that he missed yesterday's game against Tennessee. Keep an eye on that. Mark Ingram was very solid as a replacement in his absence. And Julio Jones' hamstring injury was so bad that they had to put him on injured reserve, Tennessee did. It may be time to move on from Julio Jones. That's nothing against Julio Jones. It's purely fantasy football. I will always root for Julio Jones. He's given us so many thrills over the years. But this is 2 years in a row that it's been kind of a wash for him. So it may be time to move on. In Thursday's game, the key injury was Miami quarterback Jacoby Brissett suffering a knee injury. It sounded like he could have continued, but this isn't the first time Brian Flores has pulled a mid-game quarterback switch. And Jacoby had been replacing Tua Tagovailoa and got replaced by Tua Tagovailoa, who has a broken ring finger on his throwing hand. And that's why he didn't start. So keep an eye to see who starts this coming week. Thursday night's game is New England at Atlanta. Atlanta had one new injury of note yesterday. It was tight end Hayden Hurst suffered an ankle injury. He's kind of a key player in their 12 personnel, not really a key fantasy asset, but still, it's important to the Falcons to have him. Nothing new for New England, but Damian Harris and Gunnar Olszewski both missed yesterday's game with concussions, and Jonnu Smith missed the game with a shoulder injury. So see if they can turn around and come back on a short week. For Cleveland, left cornerback Troy Hill suffered a bit of a scary neck injury. He had to be helped off the field, and he was taken to a hospital for observation, was unable to return with the team to Cleveland, but was able to finally get back to Cleveland. So prayers up to him. Hopefully he's well soon. His replacement, left cornerback A.J. Green, also got injured, suffered a concussion. They're short in the backfield, defensive backfield already. So keep an eye on those injuries. They also lost wide receiver Anthony Schwartz to a concussion. And quarterback Baker Mayfield is a one-man mash unit. He suffered a knee injury yesterday. He didn't get put back in the game. It sounded like if push came to shove, he could have played, but that game was so out of hand at that point, there was no point in putting him back in the game. So it sounds like he may be able to play this week, but keep an eye on that. Dallas wide receiver CeeDee Lamb suffered an arm contusion. That doesn't sound serious at all. He didn't come back in the game, but again, it was mostly a function of that game being way out of hand and not really needing him any longer. New Orleans wide receiver Ty Montgomery suffered a finger injury where the finger was not pointing in the direction it should have been. It looks pretty bad. He's not a huge fantasy guy, and he doesn't get a lot of touches of the ball, but they do have packages for him, and they do use him in the offense. Tennessee lost strong side linebacker Bud Dupree to an abdomen injury. Bud Dupree was one of the big prize free agents of the 2021 class. Keep an eye on him. Tennessee's defense has been playing a lot better lately, but he would be a big absence for them. Jacksonville, right inside linebacker Dakota Allen suffered a shoulder injury on special teams. He's the backup to Miles Jack. For the Jets, left cornerback Brandon Eccles suffered a thigh injury, did not return. Detroit weak side linebacker Trey Flowers suffered a knee injury. He had been playing very well in that game. Keep an eye on that injury. And running back Jamar Jefferson suffered an ankle injury on his touchdown run yesterday. He's been getting some run with Jamal Williams out. So hopefully he can come back soon. Big ones in Pittsburgh, the biggest being weak side linebacker TJ Watt, one of the perennial defensive player of the year candidates, suffered a hip and a knee injury on a sack of Jared Goff. Sounds like he's going to miss some time, hopefully not too much. Also, left cornerback Joe Hayden suffered a foot injury in that game, did not return. And they lost both of their guards to ankle injury, left guard Kevin Dotson and right guard Trey Turner. That's not good for Najee Harris if those guys have to miss time. Washington, another big defensive injury, left defensive end Chase Young suffers what I can only guess is at least a multi-week injury, knee injury. He refused to get carted off the field. They helped him off the field. He got on crutches. He gave a halftime speech, and he was on the sideline for the second half. But it sounds like that's a pretty serious injury, and keep your eyes on the news in the days coming up. Also, tight end Ricky Seals-Jones, who was already a replacement for Logan Thomas, suffered a hip injury and did not return. For Tampa Bay, right cornerback Richard Sherman suffered a calf injury in the pregame warm-ups and didn't play at all. And his replacement, D. Delaney, suffered a concussion during the game. And both those guys are replacements for Carlton Davis, who is on IR. Also for Tampa Bay, nose tackle Vita Vea, very late in that game, suffered an MCL sprain and a bone bruise. And it sounds like he's going to miss at least a week. He's probably going to be week to week. Fortunately, he didn't suffer a serious injury that would cost him the season. For Arizona, quarterback Colt McCoy, who was finding the sledding a lot rougher yesterday than he was against the 49ers, suffered a chest injury against the Panthers, a pectoral muscle, and did not return. If Kyler Murray can't come back this week, it might be Chris Strevner at quarterback for the Cardinals this coming week. For Philadelphia, tight end Dallas Goedert suffered a concussion. That's a key part of their offense, so hopefully he doesn't miss too much time. Concussions are tricky. Look at the New England situation last week. Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson suffered concussions in Week 9. Harris was not able to come back in Week 10, but Stevenson was. So keep an eye on the Goddard situation. Denver had another injury in the linebacking core. Right inside linebacker Baron Browning suffered a back injury. If you go and take a look at their depth chart, it is filled with IRs. It's ridiculous how beaten up the Broncos are right now. For Green Bay, a huge injury. Running back Aaron Jones suffered a knee injury in yesterday's game and was helped off the field. He was very emotional, but it sounds like it was a decent case scenario. It sounds like an MCL sprain. And depending on the degree of the sprain, he's anywhere from a week to 5 weeks out. Hopefully it's not worse than that. Also, strong side linebacker Rashawn Gary suffered a couple injuries yesterday. The worst one was a hyperextended elbow that he is going to get an MRI on. So keep an eye on that. Green Bay defense has been playing very well lately. They shut out the Seahawks yesterday. It's the first time the Seahawks have been shut out since Russell Wilson has been there. For Seattle, left tackle Dwayne Brown suffered a hip injury. They can't really afford Dwayne Brown. He's their best lineman, and he protects Russell Wilson's blind side. So hopefully he's not going to miss too much time. Finally, for Las Vegas, fullback Alec Ingold suffered a knee injury that they think is a torn ACL. Not a big fantasy asset, but he's a big part of their offense as a blocker mostly, and they use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Also, running back Jalen Richard suffered a rib injury in the Chiefs game and did not return. He's a guy they use periodically on third down. I'm going to break the promise I made to you guys last week of looking at my teams. I did not take the time to put together my fantasy football team eval. I will do that this week. Guaranteed next week I will talk about my teams, mostly focusing on my failures. So I will do that this week, probably Wednesday. Let's talk about bye weeks coming up. Week 11, only 2 teams, but a fair amount of fantasy players will be out for Denver and the Los Angeles Rams. For Denver, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Noah Fant are very widely owned. Tim Patrick's another guy. For the Rams, Matthew Stafford, Darrell Henderson, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, and Tyler Higbee are the most owned guys. I looked for Van Jefferson on waiver wires last week, not widely available. Week 12 is another two-team week that's kind of big. Arizona and Kansas City, two of the best offenses in the league, will be off in week 12. And in week 13, some of my favorite guys to stash: Carolina, Cleveland, Green Bay, and Tennessee. A lot of players on Carolina, Green Bay, and Tennessee for me. Not so much on Cleveland. I like their running backs. Outside of that, I'm not a big fan of their pass catchers. But for me, that's a pretty big week. So if it is for you, start planning on replacing guys now. Let's look at some of the Week 10 heroes that are widely available still and whether or not you want to consider them. At quarterback, the two performances that stuck out. New England, Mac Jones was 19 for 23 with 198 yards and 3 touchdowns and no turnovers in the game against Cleveland, which is important. Cleveland has been giving quarterbacks a lot of problems. It was a very efficient game for Mac Jones. And I don't know if I really want him much outside of 2 quarterback leagues yet, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also for New Orleans, Trevor Siemian, 19 for 34 with 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Since Jameis Winston has gone out, all of a sudden, New Orleans has been throwing the ball a lot more. Again, Siemian to me is mostly a 2 quarterback league guy. At running backs, Buffalo's Matt Breida had 18 points yesterday, 3 carries for 28 yards and a touchdown. Caught all 3 of his targets for 32 yards and a touchdown. That's 6 touches. He also lost a fumble. There's just no volume there. There's no guarantee of volume. That's a guy that maybe a extremely deep league ad, but not for me. Boston Scott for the Eagles had 11 carries for 81 yards, caught both of his targets for 24 yards. It's 12.5 points. Again, it's a volume issue for me with Boston Scott. I won't be looking to actively add him. I actually actively added in some leagues Jordan Howard, who had 12 carries yesterday, also had over 80 yards. The big difference for him was he didn't find the end zone like he had the first 2 weeks. He was being used a lot in that backfield. And you got to be thinking it's getting close to Miles Sanders being back in the next week or 2. Wide receiver, Kendrick Bourne for New England had a really nice day. Had 3 carries for 43 yards. Also caught all 4 of his targets for 98 yards and a touchdown. And that touchdown catch was in between 2 guys where he went up and took it away from him. It was a really nice catch. I love Kendrick Bourne as an NFL player, and I love 24.1 fantasy points. But Kendrick Bourne could turn around and give you 6 fantasy points next week. There's just no sense of consistency or volume available for Kendrick Bourne. But it's a deep league ad. For Las Vegas, Brian Edwards had 4 targets for 3 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown, 17.8 PPR points. Really nice touchdown catch where he just wasn't going to be denied the end zone. Again, it's a volume issue for me. And the Raiders, he was like the one guy for the Raiders that looked like he came to play last night. They're a team that if they don't watch out, their season's going to get away from them. They've looked flat the last 2 weeks. For Tennessee, Marcus Johnson, who's mostly a special teams player, Did have 6 targets, 5 catches, 100 yards, 15 points. He's got to show me more. Like I say, he's mostly a special teams guy, and New Orleans looked like they did everything they could to not let A.J. Brown beat them yesterday. For Pittsburgh, a function of Mason Rudolph being the quarterback with Ben Roethlisberger on the COVID list. He had 12 targets. He caught 9 of them for 63 yards. 15.3 PPR points is nice, but there's no guarantee that that continues once Ben Roethlisberger gets back. I would rather have James Washington. For Washington, guy I would keep an eye on is DeAndre Carter, who's had some touchdowns lately. He had 1 carry for 4 yards yesterday. He also had 6 targets, 3 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown, 15-point week. He has had several weeks where he's had touchdowns. So keep an eye on him. I'm not running out to get him. To me, Terry McLaurin is the main guy to own there, and maybe the tight end. And speaking of tight ends, the one tight end I'm going to mention this week is Cleveland's Austin Hooper, who had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 25 yards, and a touchdown, which the touchdown gives you 12.5 PPR points. The problem with Austin Hooper and the Cleveland passing offense is they don't pass a lot. They run every time they can. Austin Hooper's only had 35 targets on the year through 10 games, and they've got 2 viable other tight ends there. 3 tight ends is just too many for a team that doesn't pass that much. There's no guarantee of consistent production from Austin Hooper. Okay, let's look at some pickups for Week 11. If you're missing Matthew Stafford, you don't have a backup. If you're looking for a guy, I would really consider Cam Newton. He's still available in over 80% of leagues, and I think most of the leagues he's been picked up in or is rostered in are 2 quarterback leagues. If you need a replacement for Matthew Stafford, I would very much consider Cam Newton versus Washington. He only played 7 plays yesterday, which is actually a little bit of a surprise to me that he was even active. But they did need a backup for P.J. Walker. But in those 7 plays, Cam Newton generated a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown to Robbie Anderson, who I'll talk about in a little bit. So consider him. And the second guy I would consider as a Stafford replacement would be New England's Mac Jones, who I talked about a little bit earlier. I really like the matchup in Atlanta versus the Falcons. He may not get a lot of passes, but I think it's going to be an efficient performance, and there's no reason to think, other than Miami beating Baltimore, that New England will fall to Atlanta. Speaking of the Patriots, for running backs, Ramondre Stevenson is still available in 65% of leagues or more, and he had a huge performance yesterday against Cleveland. If Damian Harris isn't back, especially, he's a spec ad. He may have another performance like that if Harris is out, or it may be a game where they stick the ball in the gut of Brandon Bolden or J.J. Taylor. That's the risk with the New England backfield. But his role's been building over the last 3 weeks, and I like Stevenson as the recommended running back ad of the week. Keep an eye on Jeff Wilson of the 49ers tonight in the game to see if he has a decent role in that game. If so, going forward, that could be a nice flex play. For wide receivers, a guy I have not been mentioning much on my show because I kind of thought he was more widely owned, is Baltimore wide receiver Rashad Bateman. They get the Bears this week, and Bateman's a guy I would add rest of the season. If you don't have him, you need a wide receiver. That's a guy I could recommend highly. Another guy I've been talking about quite a bit on the show is Jacksonville's Jamal Agnew. They play the 49ers this week. He had 5 targets yesterday. He caught none of them, and he even dropped a pass. But he took a ball on a handoff and went around left end, and he was gone. He ran a 66-yard touchdown where nobody even got close to him. He is lightning in the open field, and I love him as a flex player going forward. The ghost of Robbie Anderson is back. The guy I had been recommended dropping earlier in the season is a guy I would add speculatively with Cam Newton under center rather than Sam Darnold. Robbie caught Cam's touchdown pass yesterday. It was a 2-yarder, but add Robbie Anderson if you need somebody in a pinch or at the end of your bench. The Giants were on bye this week, but both wide receivers Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney are widely available. It's not a dream matchup against the Buccaneers, but the Buccaneers are pretty banged up in the defensive backfield still. And in Shepard's case, he hasn't been playing a lot, but there's only been one game he's played where he's had less than 7 targets. And as I say, volume is key in fantasy football. Those are guys I would consider picking up if I needed somebody. Toney, you don't know what you're going to get. I recommend Shepard a little bit more highly. Toney looked like he was going to set the world on fire until he got hurt against the Cowboys, and he has not been used much since. And the final guy I recommend this week is New Orleans' Traquan Smith with Trevor Siemian under center. He's been yesterday. He had at least 3 red zone targets, and he did catch a touchdown. He's been getting more volume with Siemian under center when they've been throwing more. So that's a guy I would consider probably at the bottom of the list I've given you. At tight ends, it's going to be my greatest hits. Tyler Conklin did not have a huge day against the Chargers. He had 5 targets. He caught 3 passes for 11 yards, but the touchdown drought for him is over. He had 2 touchdowns yesterday, and he's a guy I've liked all along. If I'm at a pinch in tight end, and also Jacksonville's Dan Arnold. They play the 49ers this week. Dan Arnold in the last 3 games for Jacksonville has had 24 targets, 17 catches for 195 yards. He has not found the end zone. But if you've got a tight end averaging 10 points a game over any stretch, you got a tight end worth rostering. The final one is more of a spec ad based on single week usage, and that's Gerald Everett of the Seattle Seahawks. In a game where Russell Wilson looked very rusty coming back and maybe not even fully healthy. Gerald Everett had 8 targets. He caught all of them for 63 yards. He's a guy to at least keep an eye on. If you need a guy in a pinch, he's a guy I would consider. This week's kicking streamer is going to be Seattle's Jason Myers versus the Cardinals. I know that they just got shut out by the Packers. The Cardinals are looking a little bit shaky at this time. I think this could be a high-scoring game, and it will be in Seattle. So I like Myers this week. And a couple of defenses I want to recommend. First, the Carolina Panthers versus Washington. In a game where I would not even have touched them, they shone. They had 4 sacks. They had at least 2 turnovers in that game. They've been playing really well the last 3 weeks. And Washington is a less than stellar offense. That should be a low-scoring game. And finally, another game I think will be low-scoring is the Philadelphia-New Orleans game. I like Philadelphia at home as a deep dive versus New Orleans. And that will just about wrap it up. A couple of things. I'm going to shout out the Movember charity once again. A number of your favorite fantasy football Twitter analysts are trying to raise money this month for mental health awareness, for suicide prevention, for cancer. All those things are under the Movember.com umbrella. Look for our team at #FFTwitter. If you can spare $1 or $2, please do. It's an important cause. Finally, follow us on Twitter at 32 and 32 Fantasy Football. That's at 32IN32FF. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like our videos, please, if you get a moment. And finally, if you want to follow me, my handle is in the lower left-hand corner. And have a great week. Be kind and respectful to each other, and I will see you here a week from today.